In fact, we just put up a picture of, what do you call it? Well, that's
Hi, everyone. We're going to get started here in a minute or so. So thank you so much for coming out for tonight's talk, and welcome. My name is Greer Luce. I am the new curator of education and public programs at Morven, and very excited to introduce today's program and speaker. As many here may know, the history of the Delaware and Raritan Canal is closely tied to Morven. We aim here to interpret the complicated and multifaceted life of Robert Field Stockton, also known here as the Commodore. And our speaker today is going to talk about how the Commodore is connected to the Delaware and Raritan Canal. Today, we will learn even more about one of the nation's most successful towpath canals and its significant contributions, I should say, to not only New Jersey history, but American history. It's now my pleasure to introduce tonight's speaker, Linda Barth. A lifelong resident of the Garden State, Linda has written multiple books on the Delaware and Raritan Canal, multiple children's books, and she told me to reference this wonderful table here of many of her other publications about New Jersey history. Linda spent 45 years in the Bridgewater Raritan School District, and she is the current executive director of the League of Historical Societies of New Jersey and president of the Delaware and Raritan Canal Watch, a friends organization of the Delaware and Raritan Canal State Park. So without further ado, I'll pass things over to you, Linda.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
DNR Canal. Whoa, just about everyone. There's walking, running, hiking, kayaking. I've seen people snowshoeing, and that's in the calendar for next year, and horseback riding, lots of things. Well, good. So we are the DNR, one of the most successful towpath canals in the Northeast, as Greer mentioned. One of many anthracite canals. These were built to bring coal from the Pennsylvania coal fields, which are shown in gray, to the markets in Philly and New York and towns along the way. So here we are. What's missing is our feeder that's up here. So we had the Delaware Canal in Pennsylvania, the Susquehanna, the Schuylkill, and many other canals bringing coal. That's their main job. Here's a very simple map drawn by Gary Klein-Edler, our favorite map maker, just to show the canal and a few towns, not to confuse people with a lot of highways and other places. Some people like to say it's a Y shape, and it connects the Delaware River over in Bordentown to the Raritan River in New Brunswick. And this is the way it used to be. Horses, actually mules, towing canal boats. What's odd about this picture is that we have an adult with the mules. Normally that would be a child, the captain's son or a hired kid. What you can't see because of the light of the picture is that there's a rope connecting the harness of the mules to the boat so they can pull it along the tow path, T-O-W, path. Why do you think walking with them? They know where they're going. You didn't know you have to answer questions. So why do they need a person? They will stop and eat. That's exactly right. This is a salad bar for them. And if they keep stopping, you'll never get where you're going, deliver your product, and come back and do it all over again. This is along the feeder with the Delaware River on the top left and the Belldale Railroad next to it. When the railroad came in, the mules were forced off the towpath, and the railroad told them, well, you put your mules over here where it's not even. You know, the railroad had power then as it does now.
Do you know which bridge that is?
I think that's the Lambertville Bridge, but I can't swear to that. Robert Field, yes, he used to live here. I'm going to read this because I don't want to give misinformation about our friend Mr. Stockton, not Stockton, Commodore. The state legislature in 1830 granted a charter to the DNR Canal Company, but on the same day they granted a charter to the Camden and Amboy Railroads, both going in the same part of the state. The canal, after 3 days of stock sales, was woefully short. The railroad was sold out in 10 minutes. In danger of it being invalidated, Robert Stockton came to the rescue. He convinced his father-in-law, Mr. Potter, to fund the remaining 4,800 shares and validate the charter. The two then joined the railroad and the canal, and that is called the Marriage Act, and they become the joint companies. And you can see a bank note here for that company. And you can tour Morven and learn more about Mr. Stockton. So mostly children walked with the mules. Some of these pictures are from the Historical Society of Princeton, and we thank them. You can see, this is very odd to have such a number here. Usually they just have two. But children with them, more children. And why do they have this fringe hanging down? Right, to keep off the biting flies, kind of like a walking fly swatter. And they could bring their own lunch along too, right around their heads. This is a Jersey team, but no one has successfully explained to me why it is a Jersey team, because one is black and one is white, but that's what they're called. Again, we have children. Now, notice this young person has a missing foot. I'm guessing there was probably an accident, but this is a family business, a family boat. You go on, and the job has to be done. Children who were tiny would be tied on to the boat. In case they went in the water, you could haul them back up. And that's actually what happened. A lot of people could not swim, and so it was important to rope the children in. Our first engineer was Canvas White. Canvas came from some experience on the Erie Canal, and you wanted people with experience because there were no engineering schools. So you hired people from other canals. He had experience by going to England and studying the canal system. He's also the inventor of hydraulic cement, which is cement that sets underwater. Don't ask me any engineering questions about that. I don't know anymore. And he sadly passed away just as the canal was opening. And his place was taken by Lambertville's Ashbel Welch. Although we didn't have cameras in the 1830s, this is a much later picture, but the same building methods. Horses pulling scoops, wheelbarrows, that's it. Very non-technical. You don't see any bulldozers or steam shovels. And a drawing of similar things. We're lucky that we have quite a few mile markers, and they're all angled to the path. So if you're walking this way, I have 37 miles to walk until I get to Bordentown. But if you're walking this way, I only have 7 more miles to New Brunswick. Those two will always add up to 44, the length of the main canal. Let me ask you this. If the canal is dug out of dirt, just like you have dirt in your yard, when it rains in your yard, what happens to the rain? The water. It's absorbed. So if you build a canal out of dirt and you put water in it, what's going to keep the water from seeping into the dirt and disappearing?
The rocks that you land.
Not rocks, because the water can go between rocks. So you need, what? A clay. Most canals have a clay liner to hold in the water. And when they dredge, which they did recently, the dredge operator has to be careful to only remove the silt and not make a hole in the clay liner and make a leak in the canal. So we start with Bordentown, the Delaware River to the top left, and Crosswicks Creek in front. A lot of groups have been canoeing Crosswicks Creek, waiting for the tide to be right. But if you come down here today, I-295 is here, and there is a scenic overlook, if you've ever noticed that. You can walk down here, but you will not see these buildings. You only see foundations. But here would have been the mule stable, the company office, the lock tender's house,
probably a few other canal-related buildings with the railroad on this side. Bordentown, very busy. Boats who are waiting to go into lock number 1 would tie up here and wait their turn. A lot of companies in Bordentown. These ports were very busy 150 years ago. Today, this is the Bordentown Yacht Club. We used to take people on little boats into the beginning of the canal. But the state, in order to get pedestrians in there, has now put a low bridge. Ergo, we cannot get under it. We cannot take you to the lock. Oh, well. But this lock is well preserved because it's underwater every time the tide changes. So that preserves it.
The railroad track
What?
There's a railroad track.
That's today the light rail, the New Jersey Transit light rail that goes all along the Delaware River. You can get out at every little town and explore. So along comes Mr. Roebling in 1849 from his home in Pennsylvania, decides to make his wire rope company here in Trenton because he has rail transport, canal transport, river transport, and he's near the iron mill, steel mill. Perfect. And he brings his wire rope business right here. Roebling Museum last night had a program about a Roebling Bridge in Maine, but next month's program will be by Zoom about the Roebling bridges in Bucks County. So you might go to the roeblingmuseum.org and check that out. Once trains came, which was not early on, and became more powerful, they could carry heavier loads, as the canal did. This was not always coal port in Trenton, but it became coal port, where the trains would come in. But then if you want to get the coal to your little town where the railroad doesn't go, you need a canal boat. By the way, what are these factories?
Pottery.
Right, Trenton had at least 100 potteries over the years. Some lasted a long time, some not so long. So in order to get your coal from the train into your boat, that seems like a lot of shoveling. But some very smart people put the train cars on a trestle. You leave your mules here and use poles to push your boat underneath, open the bottom of the car, and by gravity, you load your boat without a lot of muscle power. The same thing was found in Phillipsburg on the Morris Canal to take coal from Pennsylvania also. All right, now this is a little tricky. North is over here. So you're coming from north, coming into Trenton. This is the feeder meeting the main canal. Today, if you stand here, this is Route 1. The canal does flow under it. There are actually people who said that they have canoed under Route 1. I don't know if they have or not, but who am I to say?
There are crazy people.
There are crazy people. Yes, there are. We are lucky in Trenton. It's easier to follow the canal. It's tricky with all the streets, but the bridges all have a yellow trim. So it's easy to find your way through the streets of Trenton looking for the canal. And we are lucky that we have a lot of bridge tender and lock tender houses. In Trenton, bridge tender houses still out. This is the Tyvek house. I believe it is owned by Thomas Edison College, and it's still iffy what's going to happen with that. I don't think it's still the Tyvek house, but you can see it used to be falling apart. This house is the only one not owned by the state park. It is owned by Trenton, and a teacher has been living here for 30 or 40 years. She raised her family here, and she just pays her rent to the city. For a long time, the trail was incomplete. It had missing links. In fact, people had to walk across Route 1 or walk down to the traffic light. Hopefully they would do that. But finally we had a handicap and bike path put over top of Route 1, much safer. When our first executive director of the Canal Commission told the DOT he wanted a bridge and he wanted it black, they said, no, we don't do black bridges. And he said, the Pulaski Skyway? Oh, okay, you can have your bridge. And he wanted it to look like a railroad bridge, so there it is. Moving along toward Port Mercer, which is south of Princeton, here's the bridge tender's house, now leased by the Historical Society of Lawrence, and they have meetings here. These and many other buildings were heavily damaged last September 1st. I'm sure you know what happened last September 1st. And this one had a lot of water in it. And because we're next to rivers, it's going to happen again and again. So we come up toward Princeton, taken from Alexander Road, formerly Canal Street. This is the Lottie B coming through the bridge at Alexander Road. Here was a hotel, at various times known as the Steamboat Hotel or the Railroad Hotel, but in the 90s fell to rack and ruin and was taken down. It is sad. The railroad, the northeast corridor, does not come into what used to be called the borough of Princeton. Now it's just called Princeton. But in order to get from Princeton Junction into town, you would take the dinky, and you still do take the dinky. And here's where it crossed the canal, and you can still see the turning mechanism that moved that bridge.
Which doesn't anymore.
No, it doesn't move it anymore. It's stationary. So for a long time, the Princeton rowing team used the canal, despite all the cargo ships in it. But eventually it got really too unsafe, and they disbanded their team. Here you can see they're back. So what to do? What to do? Well, a gentleman named Mr. Carnegie came to town. Here he is. They thought he might be building a library, but he was convinced to dam the Millstone River and create a lake, cleverly named for him, Lake Carnegie. And the rowing team is still in that lake today, using it. When they had the 100th anniversary of the lake, one of his descendants came to the meeting and reminded everyone to say his name Carnegie, not Carnegie. So I tried to do that. Building the dam required a lot of work. Here they're using canal boats to load and unload, and the horses are actually using horsepower to operate the crane. Because first they had to frame it with wood before adding the concrete. And thanks to Google Earth, we can see the dam across here. So the Millstone River is here, and it becomes Lake Carnegie when it's backed up. This is not far from the Red Mill in Kingston, if you know what that is. Now, at some point, the Millstone River turns and goes under the canal. You can see it's over here. And so in order to make that happen, you have a water-filled bridge. What is that called? Or aqueduct. So, in fact, right now, our DNR Canal Watch work team, which goes out on Wednesdays, has been reinforcing the walkways on both sides. So it's safer for you. So the canal is going over top of the Millstone River here. Now, all this time from Trenton, it's been on the level. The land has not risen or fallen, very straight, and that's what we like. Now we get to Kingston, and the land drops. If we were in the river, you would have white water, and we can't do that. Canal boats, they don't really like that. They like to be on flat water. So we get to Kingston, and here is the lock. Actually, here is the lock, better picture. It's only white water like that because it is now a water supply, and they're measuring the water as it comes through there. It would not have been the case when it was really working. So we come to the lock. The lock is like a bathtub or a water elevator. We just came back from the canals of England, and we had a lot of experience working the locks. But we had our own lock tenders here. The lock is filled. If you're coming from here and you're going to descend down here, you're going to come in, float in, close the gates behind you. Now, the lock tender is going to come out on this little board with a special wrench, turn these pipes, you might call them. And way down here, little doors will open, so the water goes out gradually. So think back to your bathtub example. So if you put a toy boat in the bathtub and you add water, what happens to the boat? Rise. Okay, so when we add water to the lock, the boat is going to rise. If we let water out, what happens to the boat? Lowers. Lowers. Thank you for not saying sink. We do not like sink and boat in the same sentence. So here we are. Now the water level has dropped, just lower, not gone. And He's going to open the gates by pushing on this beam, and then he has to walk to the other side and open this one. At this end, they are miter gates, so they meet at a 45-degree angle. And once he opens the gates, out you go. Here is the lock tender's house, now the home of the Kingston Historical Society. And this little building. This was the toll house, but more importantly, one of the early uses of the telegraph, another New Jersey invention. And the telegraph was needed to report those speeders going more than 4 or 5 miles an hour. Because if they told you what time they were at the last lock and they got here too quickly, you would know they were speeding. And they would be fined, and they're not making a lot of money to begin with, so you really don't want to fine on top of all that. Going downstream, you next come to the Trap Rock Quarry, and we know we have ones on 29 and ones on Laurel Avenue. But what is the difference between this boat and this boat? Exactly. This one is a light boat. It's not yet filled with stone. This one is filled. But notice how this is flat. These are actually two halves of the same boat. On narrow canals, or on the Morris Canal where they had to go up an inclined plane, they could take the boats apart, turn around one half, turn around the other half, and put them back together. Called section boats or hinge boats. So here we are at the quarry, and here's the quarry today. So here's the canal, the quarry, which now has, this is our National Scenic Byway, the Millstone River National Scenic Byway. So when they put up a giant solar array, there was some complaint about that. It didn't belong on the byway, but it's there. What can we do? So what is this historic building?
Rockingham.
Exactly. We have smart people here. Rockingham, Washington's last wartime headquarters. Open, as all the state sites are, Wednesday through Sunday. Go take a visit. And now there's a trail on both sides of the canal, so you can walk uphill and go to Rockingham right from the trail. Rocky Hill. There used to be McCloskey's Tavern, a favorite haunt for the quarry people, the canal people, and the terracotta people. And this was a railroad station. Neither of these is here today. This is a little parking lot for the canal. But this is the way it looks now at that intersection, with the quarry trucks coming down, Canal Road this way, Laurel Avenue this way, and Route 518. You might recall when that bridge was closed a few years ago, everybody had to detour, including emergency vehicles, which was very difficult. The next on the way is the Atlantic terracotta. Terracotta is a clay ornamental design, sometimes brick, sometimes not. This is an example of one. And if you look in the Amboys, a lot of the buildings have terracotta designs on them. But this was an enormous operation. Over 300 acres, actually over 300 people, I should say. And they had a little railroad spur, plus, of course, the canal for transport. Now there's just one big building and a couple of little ivy-covered kilns. Now we get to Greigstown. Anyone know Greigstown? Here is lock number 9. So let's say you're coming upstream. You go first, you have to come into this lock. The lockkeeper has to push open this. This is what we had to do in England, so we know how it works. Then he had to walk all the way around, 220 feet down, 220 feet back, and push open this gate so you could come in. But this guy was clever. He built himself a little swing bridge, so he shortened his trip. So this side is the miter gates. Coming the other way, this is a simple drop, and that's what it's called, a drop gate. It drops into the water, you sail in over it, and then the mechanism here pulls it back upright. So now you are locked in, and the water will be let out or let in depending which way you're going. We still have a number of the lockkeepers' homes and bridge tenders' homes available. Here at Greigstown Causeway, we have the bridge tender's house where he lived with his family, and this little building called the station. We're about to try to restore this. It's been through so many floods and floated downstream several times. But of course, doing anything with our little nonprofit requires following the state rules, and there are a lot of them. We did just fix up the one in East Millstone, so drive by and see it. It's no longer falling into the canal. And the mill is no longer here at Greekstown either. So if he had to wait for boats, he could sit out here and not be in his home or not tending his garden. And if it's bad weather, it's nice to be in his little station. And here's another view of it. In fact, you can see his arm sitting here. This little porch is no longer there. So you're waiting for the boat to come. And when it comes, you're going to stop the road traffic and swing that bridge open by pushing against it. But how are you going to know when a boat is coming? There's no radio, no walkie-talkies. A horn. Funny you should mention horn. Sometimes they used a horn, and sometimes they used a conch shell as the horn. And here it is. Now, if I do this right, you'll hear a low sound. If I do this wrong, you'll hear a spitty sound, because this is like playing a trumpet, which I don't play. Wait, we'll try again. Better. Now, you could hear that the rule was you had to blow the captain a half mile away so the lockkeeper or the bridge tender could get ready. But how are you going to hear that a half mile away? Well, it was quiet. There were no planes flying by, trucks going by, boom boxes, phones ringing, none of that, except in the three cities, you're out in the sticks. So you could hear that echoing along the water.
Water reflects sound very well.
Very well, yes. So when he hears that, he knows a boat is coming. Not barge, by the way, boat. You've never heard me say barge. And he will push on this, will push the bridge parallel to this bank. Now, that will, of course, narrow the opening. So there is wood underneath the water to guide you through the now narrowed opening of the bridge. That was put there on purpose. Just on the other side is what we call the mule tender's barracks. Probably never the barracks for any mule tender. It kind of looks like the Grain House restaurant in Basking Ridge, and this was a big farm area, so it could have been that. It could have been many things. When we had Hurricane Floyd in 1999, the Millstone River filled this building to the top of the first floor. And we had our Canal Museum in there. We do not anymore. We knew the water had been as high as the ceiling because we could see little pieces of wood on the ceiling when the water finally went down. And we surmised that our handmade lock and bridge models were crushed against the ceiling by the water. Yes, sir?
Did they work 24 hours?
They usually did not work at night, no. So, but if you had a lamp, you could go up to a lock and then you'd be the first one in the morning.
Did they work in the winter?
You tell me.
Well, I thought I remembered something about they would drain it and do repair work because otherwise the water's going to freeze.
Right, exactly. The water's going to freeze. But even before the water would freeze, if the mules could not get traction on the icy towpath, then the season is over. Good. On the side of that building, there was an ad, kind of a billboard, that said, Barnum and Bailey, the limit of human daring, the greatest show on earth. We know this is before Ringling joined, so we can date this to the very early 1900s, probably. Today, the mule tenders barracks looks like this. By the way, the state calls this the Longhouse, but we don't. We don't call it the multi-use trail either. We call it the towpath, but they can call it what they like. Unfortunately, a few months ago, this was vandalized. People broke all the windows, and they thought it would be fun to set off all the fire extinguishers. So it was a crime scene for a long while, but we still try to have meetings in here occasionally to let them know that we still do want to use this. But it was severely damaged in '99 and in subsequent floods. The next village down the way. All of these are in Franklin Township, Griggstown and Blackwell's Mills here. This is really a lovely place, and the group that runs it has events every month. They'll have photography sales, all kinds of things. And they have a lovely garden. The last lockkeeper to live at Blackwell's Mills was Sander Fakidi, a Hungarian immigrant, who was allowed to stay here long after the canal closed. He raised 8 or 9 children without benefit of electricity or plumbing. His neighbor was Biff Hines, who used to paint him. And friends remembered that he used to stomp on grapes to make wine. So he was quite the character. I've met one of his children.
So he was the lock tender?
The last lock tender at Blackwell's Mills.
Or was he a bridge tender?
Bridge tender. I'm sorry, bridge tender, yes.
So, you know, Becca means black, so that's kind of an interesting little.
Little tidbit. I love these little tidbits. The last Franklin Township section is East Millstone. Of course, floods have surrounded this bridge tender's home as well. Behind it was the station that we repaired. It's hard to find it. There it is. It's moved. It's easily moved, and it's been in different locations in different pictures. And the bridge tender's house here has been restored about 10 years ago. We're going to have a grand ribbon cutting for our little station, and that will be on Somerset County's weekend journey through the past. The second weekend in October, we open all our sites. I'm surprised Mercer County hasn't picked that up, because Union was first. They opened all their sites the third weekend in October. Now other counties have done the same. So October 8 and 9. East Millstone had a basin so that boats could come off of the main canal, tie up, load or unload, say into the market, or spend the night if they needed to tie up. Today, most of that is filled in as a park, but we didn't know how to get this overhead shot. But a gentleman who lived across the street said, "You can come up to my second floor and take a picture out the window." Oh, thank you. He didn't even know us. I guess we didn't look like dangerous strangers. East Millstone was very busy because it was the home of Fleischmann Distillery. They made rye whiskey, and one of the byproducts was grain, which was sold to the farmers. Well, this is a grain sale day. All the farmers are lined up to buy grain for their cattle. Now, grain is left over from making alcoholic beverages. I don't know what that does to the cattle, but I guess they're all right. And look out for the locomotive. When you drive on Market Street in East Millstone, you'll see an angle along the buildings, especially by the deli. That's where the railroad went through. So after Fleischmann's left for New York State, they took their workers, their furniture, everything. It became reclaiming work, which seemed to be popular around World War I. Well, that had a fire in 1912. We know that this is the Somerville pumper. It's the centerpiece of our fire museum in Somerville. But look at these gentlemen. Do they look like they've been fighting a fire? No. Well, the historian told me that probably they had to take the train from Somerville and New Brunswick and then ride their horses out to here. So probably the fire was out by the time they got here. But this is not the only fire associated with the canal. This is a recent picture, and Millington came down to fill their tanks at the canal. Whether or not they're allowed, I don't know, and I don't care. During the winter, as the gentleman mentioned, the canal water was lowered, and the workboat could come from Trenton and make repairs. Notice they're not working, they are posing, because there's no point and shoot. You have to hold still for the cameraman. Same with these gentlemen. They stop working so they can pose. Now, we didn't really want muskrats, because muskrats would burrow into the bank, and once the bank is weakened, the water can go out. Once that starts to happen, the canal empties. There are ways that they can block it off when that happens and not lose all the water. But people were paid to bring back the tails of muskrats to show that they had captured it. Maybe 15 cents each. This has been a poster that you may have seen taken at Zarephath, a religious community called the Pillar of Fire. It's an offshoot of Methodism. But this is people just enjoying watching. Now, even though the steam tug is pulling the boat, it's still being steered. So I would still call that a boat, not a barge. At Zarephath, the nice folks there gave us this picture, which is the only picture to show the old bridge that swung to the side and the new bridge. Excuse me, this is the old bridge with the A-frame, and the new bridge, which is going to be put in probably during the winter. They needed a new kind of bridge once we had cars and trucks instead of horses and wagons. Here are the students, and this is a missionary school as well as a K-12 school system, but they're going out for an outing. Now, do you see anything wrong with this picture? I don't think you want one more person in this boat. We never heard that anything bad happened, but they bought a sailboat, made it into a motorboat, and could go to Bound Brook to their temple. South Bound Brook, where I was born, had lock number 11. None of these buildings are standing today, but old postcards are often incorrect. This postcard says Bound Brook, as do a few other. Bound Brook is on the other side of the Raritan River. And here is our lock. The bridge that going between Bound Brook and South Bound Brook used to have this big superstructure. Now it does not. And on this side, the Standard Paint Company, later GAF, later Ruberoid, many things. But they had a little side slip where boats could pull in and unload or load. Now that, over the years, became abandoned. I know that my nephew and my brother used to play there, unbeknownst to their mothers. But it took up quite a bit of space along the canal. Today, that has become a housing unit called Canal Crossing. The two different models of apartments are called the Delaware model and the Raritan model. And that is completely done today. They have a walkway on this side of the canal as well, and a bridge to get over to the towpath. Very nice. So there's the then and now. In Southbound Brook, we had a very high bridge. So if you didn't have a tall boat, you could go under here without anybody swinging the bridge open. In fact, the mules could walk along this little path so their harness would not get mixed in with all the cabling. Notice there are buildings here, and this is right between the Raritan River and the canal, which floods pretty often. There was even a bottling works. When I was growing up, this was the town dump right next to the towpath. In fact, there is still a big, big pile there covered with plastic that the DEP has covered. You don't want to even know what's in there. Probably not. Notice this says Bound Brook, which it is not.
It's Southbound Brook?
It is Southbound Brook. Now, in Southbound Brook, the canal makes a big turn and heads for the terminus at New Brunswick. This is, again, now actually this is Franklin Township, but it still says Bound Brook and a nice Scottish spelling of loch. Don't ask me why. Many postcards were colored or inked in Europe, where people didn't know what color things were. They just picked a color. So coming down to New Brunswick, the towpath is in fact a dike holding out the Raritan River, or sometimes not holding out the Raritan River. Landing Lane is where you would cross from Franklin Township to Piscataway over the Raritan River. Here is the bridge tender's house, here is the canal. To try to take a now picture is very difficult. You have to stand in the bushes, and none of those buildings are there. This was closed for a while they repaired these bridges, and that caused a lot of detour. So here you are looking straight across the bridge into Piscataway.
The Landing Lane Bridge.
That's correct. The upper lock in New Brunswick was the last lock before the end, said to be the deepest lock. Not really, but it said that. And it went right past Johnson & Johnson. They had their own fleet of boats, each named for a New Jersey city, and they had their own advertising: absorbent cotton, medicinal plasters, and antiseptic dressings. This is the home of the Band-Aid, not invented at J&J, but invented by one of its relatives. Come next month, you'll hear all about it, or one of its workers. And here they are up close. This is their boat, the Trenton. I was given these next two pictures by the Johnson & Johnson historian. I think she made this crayon mark through it so that it couldn't be sold or given to anybody else. Okay. Here's the last lock. It has been destroyed. It's not there now. And just before they were to move the lock tender's house, it mysteriously got destroyed. Don't know. Down the way in New Brunswick was the Janeway Wallpaper Company, one of the first of its kind. And look they knew how important the canal was. Their branch in Chicago was right on Canal Street. But it did have a big fire. But if you had a fire, you would leave your mules here, use poles again to push your boat over here to load or unload. And steamboats did come early to our canal, but we used mule-drawn boats also the whole time. Standing in Highland Park looking toward New Brunswick, Raritan River, Canal. And a trolley fan gave me these two, very clear. Kids are waiting to jump in. Here is the Northeast Corridor Rail Bridge. The trolley bridge that obviously is no longer there. Nor are these tanks there, nothing, but very clear pictures. New Brunswick, like Trenton, had much industry. You can see a lot of smokestacks and some church spires. So the first time the railroad made a bridge across the Raritan at New Brunswick, they left a place to swing open for tall-masted vessels. Trains up here, people down here. Then it was replaced by this bridge, and still this part could swing. So tall vessels, unlimited height vessels could use this waterway. But then in 1905 or so, they built this bridge that is still there today. Now, from this point on, vessels are limited to 50 feet in height. No more tall vessels. Now, this is an odd picture. It's an optical illusion because you know that the mules and the boats can't go through different arches, but they're connected by a rope. So I think it's just the reflection and maybe the way it was taken, but it's a good view of the towpath. It shows you how wide it was. But it's a very unusual view. In New Brunswick, the runoff from the city came right into the canal and then was allowed to go right back into the river so as not to make the canal too deep.
Runoff, you mean?
Runoff, exactly. So when they restored in 1998, they restored the end of the canal in New Brunswick, we said, let's restore the mule bridge here, and then you can have a public boat ride. Wouldn't it be nice? You could bring your family, your groups on a public boat ride. However, they said, no, we can't do that. They put a low bridge here and a low bridge here, thus no boat ride in New Brunswick. We have been trying to get you a boat ride. We could educate the public, teach them about water quality, because it is a drinking water supply. But the state and the water authority always seem to have reasons why we can't do that.
Is that when it was low on water, or?
No, the river was low, but the canal is always the same height, same depth.
So the river was low.
Yes, the river is all, the Raritan is not much navigable beyond New Brunswick.
Was it tidal in New Brunswick?
It is tidal, correct. This is the way it used to look at the end, near Boyd Park. Today, if you know New Brunswick, there are about 8 lanes of Route 18 where all these houses are. But this was a residential area 100 years ago. Hard to imagine. Very busy as boats came and went and had to be lowered or raised to match the tide at the time. It was so busy that they built a second lock here. And in 1998, they redid this bridge, so it does still swing. And the stone is here so that when you're walking backwards, pushing open the beam, you have some traction. So here's the end. This was a municipal pier. The canal ended here and went on and on and on and down to Trenton. So where does all this water come from?
Wait. After it was restored in 1998, didn't something happen and it all got messed up?
Well, there was Hurricane Floyd in 1999. That did a good job on,
All the fresh water.
and things had to be redone. That's true. So where does all this water come from?
The Delaware.
Cedar Canal, the Delaware River.
From the Delaware River, exactly. So, because it has to,
When the canal boats got to to Brunswick, and they're loaded with anthracite coal. How did they get it to New York?
They would be towed into Raritan Bay and up to New York. They had to be towed. Good question. So the Delaware is the only undammed river in the east. This is not a dam across the river. This is a wing dam. See, it's not all the way across. But it backs up the water so that it then goes into the feeder canal and brings it all the way down to the main canal in Trenton. There is now a new path, and you can walk out and see where this water enters the canal. The new path has been opened, hasn't been open for quite a few years because there had been a death at the campground there. But now they have done it. It's called the Inlet Trail. It passes the Prallsville Mill complex in Lambertville, the Lambertville station, which really was a station. Here's the train. Here's the canal. You can sit out here and have dinner next to the canal, Lambertville station. The train is coming back to Lambertville. Right now it goes Flemington to Ringo's. I have not seen a train in Lambertville since Christy Whitman was campaigning on the back of the train. So it is supposed to be coming back. It is the Black River and Western. The canal then and the train went past the Perseverance paper mill. It almost looks like it's connected to the railroad, but it's not. Now we know from this logo that this is a Pennsylvania boat, and it has mules. So how could, if mules hate water, and they do, how could this boat have gotten here from Pennsylvania? Well, some very smart people invented a cable ferry between Lambertville and New Hope. So you would attach your boat to the cable and angle it one way to have the current take you to New Hope, or the other way to have the current take you to Lambertville. The mules would just stroll across the Lambertville-New Hope Bridge and meet you on the other side. They will not go, they will not even walk in puddles. I've walked with mules in Easton at a dry time, and they will walk around where the puddles would be because they won't walk in it. Actually, that's because they're smart. They could break a leg in a puddle. I don't know if they know that. And just a pretty picture along the feeder. The railroad, the canal.
And that looks like a section boat?
It could be a section boat. I can't quite tell. But this is nice because they have to keep the sun off them when they're steering. Oops. Sometimes accidents did happen, and we have pictures of such things. In Trenton, trolleys and boats had collisions. But this is the mail train. The mail was a little late that day. But actually, by then, the feeder, which was never used much for transport, by then it was near the end of its life, but still it was hard to get the locomotive, I'm sure, out of the canal. We do not like natural bodies of water to enter the canal. Usually they go under the canal. So here's the path, and also was the railroad. And here is the Jacobs, I think it's a Jacobs Creek going under the canal in a culvert, which is almost always the case. There are still a few streams that go directly in, but very rarely. So the feeder goes down along Cadwallader Park in Trenton. It's the city park. And across another aqueduct. This is Parkside Avenue. Here's where you're walking. And here it is with a modern car going under. Probably they don't even know that the state park is over their head.
Around the corner, I didn't know that was a canal for the longest time.
There you go. You don't see it, that's right. Because our canal was so wide and had movable bridges, we could take almost any kind of vessel. Yachts going down to Florida for the winter, military vessels. It was used in 3 wars because it's a good inland connection between the Brooklyn Navy Yard and the Philadelphia Navy Yard. Not go out where there might be U-boats in the water. This is, thank you, J.P. Morgan's boat, the Corsairs, said to have gold bathroom fixtures and a wood-burning fireplace. But yachts could be seen, and if they tied up in your town, servants might give you a tour. Here are some of the military vessels coming through. Artillery. And this subchaser is being used to bring the rowing team from Annapolis to row against Princeton. Nice to have your own transport, eh? During the Spanish-American War, the Alvarado was a captured gunboat, a Spanish gunboat, and was captured and taken through New Brunswick. I'm not sure where it ended up. William Vanderbilt, one of the Vanderbilts, had this yacht, but he had it built this way because he wanted it this way. If you're a millionaire, you may have it built any way you like. The Robert F. Stockton, later known as the New Jersey, was the first steamboat. Jersey invention. Not the first ever submarine. The one in the Revolutionary War the Turtle was not particularly effective. But John Holland from Patterson built the first submarine, tested it in the Passaic River, then went on to build bigger and bigger models. Now it's accepted. How is he going to get it to Washington? He's not going to take it in the ocean. Take it down the canal and the rest of the intercoastal waterway to Washington. It's too deep for the canal, so he has it on pontoons. And here is the inventor, sticking his head out of the hatch. And these are sea trials out off Perth Amboy, where the Navy came to observe. We lost this picture in Hurricane Floyd, but the Patterson Museum kindly gave us another. Lots of vessels, as we said, use this canal. My father found 2 fuel tanks from an airplane after the war and made this catamaran. So this is my grandmother and my parents on the canal. My mother said she was expecting me that summer. So I was on the canal before I was born. And that may still be at the bottom, because this section hasn't been dredged yet, and some people made holes in it and it sank, so who knows, might still be there. And just a few pictures of people enjoying themselves. Now, look at their headgear, their clothing, their expressions. Remember, they had to hold still for the picture, so they couldn't really be holding a smile that long. Very fancy. Canoeists. With a tie, even. Swimming in the feeder at Cadwallader Park. Nice outfits, guys. Probably wool. And even in the busiest part of the canal in Trenton, if it's hot, people are going to swim. Yeah, disgusting. But there they are. And in Greekstown, people made their own little diving board. This is the later King Post Bridge, not the A-frame bridge. And here it is from the other direction. There's their diving board. And he's still in his Sunday go-to-meeting clothes, so this most likely is Sunday. Greekstown was the home of many Scandinavian families. The dads would stay in New York and work and then come out here for the summer weekends. And the kids and moms would stay here. And they would run all around the place. We've had oral histories from older people who said, yeah, we were allowed to play all day out in the woods and down by the canal and the river. No one cared. Sue Reitmeyer is being pulled by her dog on the canal. And the canal, like many lakes and ponds, was used to harvest ice. So they would use special tools to score the ice. And then the horse would drag it up the chute and into the ice house. So the ice house, which was dug in the ground to keep it cooler, the ice would usually be covered with straw, sawdust. I asked some kids, what do you think the ice was covered with? They didn't know. I said, well, what do you get when you saw wood? And they said, blisters. Oh, well. Nice try. And people just having a good time in the snow. Finally, this is in Titusville near Washington Crossing. The canal is being dredged even back then to keep the water moving quickly. But again, he has to be careful to only remove the silt and not the clay liner. Finally, the canal, which was very profitable, goes into deficit. One, because of railroads. Railroads could go all night and day. Railroads could go all year. The snow didn't stop them. The canal couldn't. Even with the advent of pleasure boating, the tolls were not enough to keep it open. So the charter said if it is not operating for 3 straight years, it becomes the property of the state of New Jersey, which it is today. This is the section in Trenton, which was deeded to Trenton. They built a road. Now they're tearing up that road and building another road. It's Route 129. It goes past the prison. And you'll notice if you're on that road, it dips and it dips again. That's because that's where the locks were. Now it is one of the premier recreational parks in the state. My husband, who was a birder, had never in New Jersey seen a wood duck until he went to downtown Trenton, and there it was. People use it for many, many activities. This is a boat race that's held around Thanksgiving every year. But they have to pick those boats up and take them around the locks and sometimes around the bridges, so it's not an easy race. A new bridge between Somerset County's Colonial Park and the towpath. Here's Mr. Barth leading a walk. So what the three agencies control this park. One is the Water Supply Authority, which controls Round Valley, Spruce Run, Manasquan Reservoir, and the canal. So one thing they might do is build this trough. So excess water doesn't erode the towpath. It goes into the trough and out here to the next stream or to the Delaware River. Yes?
Stock the canal?
Yes, canal is trout stock. And
I've seen a couple of goldfish in there that have decided to stop.
I guess somebody wanted to get rid of their fish. Yeah, it's not stocked by the state with goldfish. All of this land is part of the Raritan River Basin, and under the watch of the Canal, of the Water Supply Authority. The Canal Commission was established when they established the canal as a park in the early 70s. They might oversee a bridge. Here you can see the canal is here. This is the Princeton team rowing. The Canal Commission must rule on anything that's being built either within 1,000 feet of the canal, which is the A zone, or even connecting any of the other water supplies that lead to us. So if you're going to add a porch, build a warehouse, whatever, you have to apply to the commission for permission. And the state park system is the third agency, and I've seen dog carts, man being pulled by his dogs, everything. The new calendar finally shows a horseback riding and a snowshoeing, so we get to show what other activities can be done. And the DNR Canal Watch does a lot of jobs. We have a Wednesday work group that does things that, with the approval of the superintendent, that they can't get to because their maintenance staff has been cut every year by state budgets. The parks just don't get what they need. So when there's a flood, our team goes out and gets rid of the mud and tries to get rid of the mold very quickly before it has time to really set in. And we lead walks, bike rides, sometimes canoe trips. Our schedule really isn't back yet since the pandemic, but hopefully by next year we'll be doing more. We have a dinner boat cruise, which we haven't been able to have in the last couple of years, but since we don't have a canal boat here, we go to Easton, Pennsylvania and go on the Lehigh Canal. And that is one of our biggest fundraisers. We have a musician, storyteller on board to entertain while we're cruising down. And here you can actually go into a lock. You cannot go through, you have to go down and then come back up and go out the same way you came in. It doesn't continue, but most people have never locked through, so this really gives you that experience. For 25 years, we had a 5K run to raise money, and it was in Washington Crossing. So as we say goodbye, if anyone has any questions, we'll try to answer them. And thank you for coming.
How much, what's the distance the canal goes? Oh. Yeah, I don't need it. How now go up and come down on
The elevation.
the elevation?
Gosh, why don't I know this?
Well,
That number has gone out of my head.
At the timing of this canal versus the Morris Canal up north.
All right, the Morris Canal opened in 1825, later extended to Jersey City. This canal was after that, a little after that.
And that one is really up and down a lot, right?
Right, it overcomes 1,600 feet in elevation up and down across the highlands
Okay,
on
now
23
you're
Incline
talking
Place.
Do you remember for being 50, 100?
What does it say?
165.
No. We have no mountains across the neck of New Jersey. No, I think it's about maybe up 50 feet from Bordentown to Trenton and then downhill.
How many locks?
We had 15 locks at the height. We no longer have one of them in Trenton.
My question is, I'm more familiar with the feeder canal from the Scottish Fall Bridge up to Landing.
Mhm.
Now, when you cross over into Pennsylvania, that canal there is in real bad shape. Is Pennsylvania?
Well, one reason that the Delaware Canal is in worse shape than ours is that it does not function as a water supply. So there's no need to keep it filled. And they're always having something break or the side break. But the Friends group raises a lot of money there. They are fabulous. And they're always assisting the state to try to keep water. Their goal is to see it watered all the way from Easton to Bristol, but very rare that happens because it was poorly built and it's right along the Delaware, so all the floods go straight into there and tear the canal apart.
I guess ours is a state park, right?
And theirs is also a state park.
Oh, theirs is too, okay.
Yes. Any other
else?
questions?
And I should add, the mic is helpful for our folks who are attending virtually. So, any other questions?
You might have mentioned this already, but why exactly is it called the Delaware and Raritan Canal?
Because it connects the Delaware River with the Raritan River.
Okay,
Pretty simple.
okay, thank you.
No one has asked a question I heard last week. Go uphill. Well, I don't think water ever goes uphill, so it doesn't. Sir?
Oh, we have one here,
Oh.
and then I'll pass that.
How long would it typically take a vessel to transit one of these locks?
Oh, the lock about 15 minutes. I thought you were going to say the whole canal, which is about 2 days.
Well, that's it.
Yeah, 2 days. The Mars Canal, 5 days.
Thanks. I think I've got 3 questions. First one, the speed limit. So you talked about that. Why?
Why? Because we don't want to create a wake to erode the banks.
Got it. Okay. So mules could pull a boat fast enough to make a wake. Wow.
No, they weren't supposed to do that, but steamboats could.
Oh, okay. Right, the steamboats. Okay. The next question is I pulled up the satellite image and I was following through Trenton, and you referred to canoeing under Route 1.
Someone said that he did.
Now, Rockland or Gillespie?
Ah, Rockland, you know that, yes. Professor Rockland said
Okay.
he did.
From Southard to Mulberry.
Ooh, I'm not good at Trenton, but go ahead.
Yeah, I'm good at Trenton.
Okay, good.
So you can't see the water.
No.
You kind of see where it like ends near Southard
Yeah.
and then it like comes out again. So is that what you're referring to as
Yes, it's
under Route
along-
1?
Yes, and they have put a new path in along Route 1. It's not particularly scenic, but it's not a missing link anymore.
Right, yeah, I see it past the concrete and then the
Yeah, so that's the
hydrocarbon.
last missing link to be
Got it,
finished.
okay. And then also, like a little bit north of that, by the concrete place and then further up, there are these metal grids, it looks like.
Ah, yes. I
What are those
believe that they are holding the side up. I believe they're reinforcing and strengthening the canal.
Okay.
My husband told me that once, but
I think that was my 3. Thanks.
okay, thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. We are having a program next Thursday. Dr. Robert Selig is coming to talk about the Washington Rochambeau marched through Princeton in 1781. So that'll be really interesting. Information's on our website. And Linda will be back in September for a talk on New Jersey invention.
Of which there are hundreds of them.
And of which there are hundreds of thousands.
Very long one.
Very long. Thank you all so much for coming out here.
This is the Canal Watch 70, so that money does not go.
Other than he got his daughter.